Hello and welcome to Inside Music, episode number 118. I'm your host, James Shotwell, and my guest this week is my best friend, Molly from Substream Magazine. Molly is a music writer and blog owner. Her site Circles and Soundwaves helped propel her into the music stratosphere, and from there she began freelancing from other people. Her content can most frequently be found in Substream Magazine, which is why I mentioned them first, but she's a lot more than that as well. Molly has a podcast, she has a real job in the music industry, and she's worked a lot of other interesting jobs. Not a lot of that matters to this conversation, however, because Molly and I talk a lot, and I've been telling her for a while that I wanted to have her on the show since November, in fact, and this episode is that finally coming to fruition. Molly and I talk about a lot of things, including what's going on with the world of print magazines, our evolving music tastes, what it takes to create a publication that people are willing to pay to support, and really just what it takes to make the things that we're passionate about lifelong careers. Now, I wish I could tell you that at the end of all of this, we have a bunch of answers for you that will help you in your own personal journeys, but we don't. It's just a conversation between two friends trying to figure out life, but it's a good one, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. Before we get there, however, I want to tell you a few really quick things. First and foremost, this episode of Inside Music and all episodes of Inside Music are brought to you by Holix, the music industry's leading digital promotional distribution company. And what that means is that Holix works with record labels and independent artists from all over the world to share new and unreleased music without fear of piracy. How they do that is something you can learn on their official website, Holix.com. That's Haulix.com. And if you sign up today, you will receive your first month completely free. That's 1 month free, any plan you choose at Haulix.com, Haulix.com. Second, I want to thank you for your continued support of the podcast. We have released a couple of episodes so far in 2018. It's kind of amazing what a difference having a place to record every week will do. And we're chugging right along. We've got the next couple episodes planned, and the show only keeps happening because of you, and the response in the last 7 days has really warmed my heart. So thank you so much for that. And finally, the music you hear in this week's episode is, I think, the very first thing Molly and I discuss once the conversation begins. So I'm not going to tell you about that, but just know that it is ignorant, and I don't apologize at all, and I hope you enjoy the show.
See you flying coast while I'm chilling up in first class. Bitch, you think I'm playing, but I'm da 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 da. Bitch, you think I'm playing, but I'm da 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 da. Bitch, you think I'm playing, but I'm da da da.
Barred out with your bitch, you can call me Xana Mojo. Got your mans is wrapped around my finger like some Play-Doh.
Should I go into what I've been into lately?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Cool. Well, I've definitely had on repeat that Lil Max song, Dada.
You feel so bad. I was wondering before I called you if that song was going to come up and if you were going to be willing to say the name of the rapper, because I keep wanting to tell people about. I even tweeting the song. I had to look at how tweets share song titles.
Yeah.
Because we live in this culture where I feel uncomfortable saying that someone's calling themselves Lil Fag, even if they spell it PH. But it's like, I love the PH part the most because it's like when people used to be like, oh, she's fat, but no, like PHAT.
Right.
Pretty hot and tempting.
Right.
He's pretty hot and gay. Get it? Fag. I love it.
No, I like it, but no, I totally hear what you are saying, and I felt kind of weird, like, seeing that name.
I know, it's hard. So that's why you have to be like, listen, just hit play. Don't look at the name.
Don't look at the name. Yeah.
I know that it's dead, then A and 3 H's, but trust me.
Well, I think that is supposed to, that is supposed to be dead ass, right? It's like what?
It's like just an ignorant way of saying dead ass, which is already an ignorant word.
A very ignorant word, yeah.
I think that song will be the music for this episode so that people know what we're talking about.
Okay, good. Because I was gonna say that if you hadn't decided already, I wanted that to be.
I usually let people choose at the end of the episode, but since I had a feeling that it would be that it would come up in this conversation because it's a song that I only shared with you this week. I didn't discover that was shown to me in the last week too. So
yeah,
I'm just passing along for everyone at home. It's Lil Fag, PHAG, not an offensive way. Then if you think that's offensive, then don't even listen to the next 10 seconds or the song or any of his other songs, because this is the least offensive song. And the
I
song
feel
is
like I'm not supposed to
to hear
like it,
yeah.
but like I totally do. Like I totally do.
It's a song that is very much like Gucci Gang in that they say "dead" 10 times every time the chorus happens. Like
Well,
I had to count it eventually. So like if they do the chorus, let's say
yeah.
5 times, they say "dead" 50 plus times in that song. And so by
Yeah,
the
I
end of it,
counted
you
with
count
Gucci
two
Gang.
songs.
I counted. I think when I wrote about the Gucci Gang video for Substream, I like went and looked at the lyrics and I was like, I'm gonna count how many times they actually say Gucci Gang in the song, and it was right around 50. And it's like a 2 minute song. Like that's insane.
And I'm pretty sure they only say it 7 times in the chorus for Gucci Gang. Deadass even more.
That's insane.
Because they get into a part. Well, Gucci Gang's 2 words. That's the. It's 3 syllables. Deadass is only 2, so you can fit in a few extra deadas. Like
Every
7
time
Gucci
you say
gangs.
that.
7. I'm like my math skills are not good, but 7 Gucci
Oh.
gangs is basically equal to 10 deadas.
Yeah.
And this is the economy of music in 2018.
Oh my god.
This is why a band like Hodera, who you and I both love, and are amazing storytellers who write a great,
Yeah.
deep songs. This is why they'll never be as big as Lil Pump, because like
Yeah.
even Hodera itself is 3 syllables. Gucci Gang is a song that is like propelled on less syllables.
Right, and like you see Hodera and like you listen to their record and like I mean this is what I wrote when I wrote about the record. Like I listened to that record all the way through and like literally sat in silence for like an hour because I just had to digest everything they were saying. When I listened to Dead for the first thing I did was play it again like 3 more times.
Yeah, it's the experience. Sometimes I wish I did. I want to get into making YouTube videos in part to do react. I love reaction videos for music, but I feel like songs like Dead is like would be a great reaction video because the first verse you're like this is stupid, and then the first chorus you're like this is dumber, and then by the time it's over, it's like when you hear the Cars for Kids commercial. It's just like stuck in your head, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
Dead for the. It's now part of my vocabulary to say Dead.
Yeah.
And I hate myself a little bit. You know what I love about it, though? In a way, I've been thinking about it this week, in that it's something that music's never been able to do before now, but it was also never a thing that could be done before now, is that it's possible for a song to be a meme in its own way, and meme culture has an economic value in certain circles. And so, like, if you can make a song that is memeable, and it's weird, it's a very fine line. Like Gucci Gang is a meme, I would say, is a meme of a song. Like it's almost like an
1,000%.
But it, like the line between that and like a bad version of that song, and I've heard many bad versions of Gucci Gang, is so thin, so razor thin. And then you hear something like Dead and it's like, okay, they did it again. So like there is a recipe on how to do it, but it's such an interesting subgenre of music that's like this niche that's like a joke unto itself, but everyone's in on the joke and we take it oddly seriously. I don't know. It's so strange. Like I can't explain how it makes me feel to be a fan of that stuff. But then I hear it and I'm like, oh, it's so good. I wish it wasn't.
Right, because if it was, if it was something that was under that line of what's good, what's bad, I would be like, okay, it would be very easy to hate it. But it's good, and so I like it, and I'm confused as to why, but I'm just going to roll with it because this song has, like, infected my brain.
Yeah. No, it's a whole thing that I keep trying to explain to people, and it's funny, I think like that SoundCloud rap is going to have a year that's a lot like what EDM used to have, where everyone is like, oh, but it's EDM, so it's not real music. And now everyone takes EDM kind of more seriously, and now it's like, now it's ignorant SoundCloud rap.
Yeah, I think that's a very good insight there.
We're so young, and it's okay. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's also, I mean, like you said, the songs are so short. Like I tweeted about this recently, but there's a trend among young rappers that I really admire, where they release songs that are like 2 minutes and 30 seconds, but if you cut off the intro and the outro, they're like 2 minutes and 15, 2 minutes and 20 seconds long, which is the exact length of a video on Twitter. And it's almost like they're built to be viral. And I
Yeah.
think and regular artists don't do that often. Like every now and then, one of those pop punk bands will drop an acoustic track that's like 2 minutes flat, and it's really
Yeah.
good, and like people love it.
Yeah, people always love the acoustic track on a
Yeah,
pop punk
like
record.
the short little get 'em track of some kind. But
Yeah.
again, to use Hodera as an example, an amazing band. There's no world where there's a 2 minute and 20-second Hodera song. It gets across what that band does. It's just a different form
Right.
of art, but it's so much harder to make people listen to it.
Yeah. Which is unfortunate because Hodera is so good. I just saw them over the weekend. They played at a church near my parents' house, and like they're so good. Maybe I'm biased because I'm from New Jersey, they're from New Jersey, but like they're so good.
I absolutely agree. They're incredible. I've been having this thought a lot about just bands in general, though. As you and I both are working at contributing to Substream, and we talk about like the bands that are going into the issues and how that's changed. And like, I've been thinking a lot about how August, September 2 years ago, we had a Taking Back Sunday cover, and then Two Cinema Club, and then this digital issue, and then it was like Maggie Rogers, Mr. Wise. And we started this whole new thing that later this week on Friday, we'll finally reveal who's on the new cover that you and I already know. And it's such a big
it's so good.
It's so big.
So
and
good.
You and I also know who's on the cover after this one and the one after that at this point. And they're all so different that I've been interested in we are gravitating towards this thing, and I feel like it's definitely where the puck is headed in terms of what people are interested in talking about. But what I find most curious about it is that gap between it is what people are listening to, but it's not. There's still this weird gap between like consumers are into it, but marketers and I guess traditional industry folk aren't really in the know. And it's kind of funny that we can have the next artist for Substream's cover is really big, and not even like striking out egos. Like they're inarguably one of the biggest artists in the world right now.
Yeah.
Top 10
top
doubt. 10 Spotify artist globally. And you and I have both talked about having conversations with other people in alternative music and in the industry in general who are like, who is that? And you're like, how do you not know?
Right.
They have 31 million people listening to them every month, and yet there are still people in this industry who make a full-time living who are like, I have no idea who that is.
Well, I think with alternative music specifically, it's a lot of people, and I will say, like, admittedly, I even was in this mindset, like, at one point, that a lot of people in alternative music are very kind of sealed into that and, like, don't really explore much outside of, like, alternative rock and punk and that kind of world. So they're just often literally not aware of, the newest Taylor Swift single or things of that caliber. But it's so mind-blowing, especially to look at how big, this artist in question really is. And like how just incredibly massive and how much they have created and outputted over the past year, and that people just don't know they exist. Like this is an artist that I turn on Z100, which is, our big top 40 station. And I hear this artist regularly, and so many people are just like, I have no idea who that is.
Absolutely. And on our end of it, and this is something that we got into last week on the episode with Brad, which I know you've heard, and the new episode of Not Quite, which is what delayed you and I starting to record. This is exporting that, which will be up tonight, which is, I don't know, what is it, Tuesday? So it's Tuesday. It'll be up later this evening. We talk about this a lot. I've been obsessed with this idea of if there can be a new leader in quote unquote alternative music, and when I say that, I expand it beyond like Warped Tour, because Warped Tour isn't not anymore, but that's a cover for alternative rock. But alternative music now is like Halsey to Lil Fagles and SoundCloud Rap to Fearless Records and Hopeless Records. It's one big umbrella, and like you can say like, well, it's a little bit more niche. There's this alternative rock, but that genre alone cannot sustain a publication. Like No, there is no publication that can only cover that corner of rock because there is not enough advertising, there is not enough money, there is just not enough to support it. So you need like it's weird because there's this glut of so much music and so much great alternative music and so many things to experience and people are interested in it, but yet there's no money to support the non-biased promotion of it through storytelling and like traditional journalism, which is strange to me because when you look at the kind of content that these artists pour into it, like you and I have talked about, Lil Pump, for example, has this amazing tour videographer who makes the kind of content,
oh my god,
the kind of content that like you would kill for a Rolling Stone to do. And I get that they can create it themselves these days, but like showing that video to somebody who doesn't get the success of Gucci Gang, you can watch that video and be like, there's something happening here. Like it's content that could sell it, but you still need a third party to get that out there. I don't think the idea that everyone, as long as individual artists create really cool content themselves, it'll get out there. Like I feel like you still need this watering hole. You need a community gathering point where people come together and they're like,
right, in terms of like an outlet.
And you build communities that way, you know what I mean? Like the Chorus FM community. That's the only really one that exists in alternative. But it's not big enough. Like there's not 4 people working full time at Chorus FM. It's like one dude and everyone else kind of contributes on the side and maybe they get paid a little bit, but there's like one full-time person. Can there be another big thing like that? And I don't know that it's possible, but I don't understand why it's not possible. Even with Substream, we can talk inside baseball here.
Yeah. So how many people are full-time at Substream?
There's not. There's like Tom.
Is anyone?
No, everyone's mostly like there's no like traditional full-time people. There are people that work in office every day. Like our designer is basically a full-time person in that sense, but no one is doing like, oh, I'm getting healthcare. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
And alternative press has also full-time people, but again, it's not like when I think of when I talk about careers, it's alternative press is having a harder and harder time staying big, let alone getting bigger. And I want to know if there's a sustainable, growable community gathering point. Like, can you make a new one of some kind? And I think that it's not necessarily possible. I think it's going to regress into individual people telling stories. But the reason I got on this whole tangent is because you and I love this music and we like telling these stories, but it's interesting that
a lot of people don't.
It's hard to, I don't know. It's like there's so much of it and no one knows where to begin that people are almost hesitant to try to get attached to any one artist anymore. Like I'm working on this Dale story right now that you and I have been talking about for a while now, and he's so inspired by like Springsteen and Bryan Adams.
But comes from like the Warped Tour scene and how many records did they put out on Fearless?
Yeah, and like there are bands from this scene that are starting to get some real legs under them in terms of longevity. Or you have bands that are hitting 20 years, 25 years that are really putting the work. But, and this isn't my point, someone brought this up to me the other day, but those bands still hit a ceiling that like they're going to get bigger. Like the chances of Taking Back Sunday somehow getting up to the level of, let's be very modest here, somehow becoming Avenged Sevenfold level big. Avenged Sevenfold plays arenas. They do 20,000 seats. They might not be the biggest rock band in the world, but they do arenas. The idea that Taking Back Sunday is going to make that jump at this point in their career is pretty slim. Like, and they're still great and they're amazing, but like, there's this weird ceiling that things hit because the community can't propel them much further. And that used to be only rock. But now that now that alternative means so much more, and there's no more genre barriers to individual tastes, there's still that weird hurdle there. There's still these weird walls that exist, but only in consumer behavior.
Yeah. Well, something that Logan and I have talked about quite a bit is both on episodes of Perspective and just in like our conversations, is the idea that like if an artist doesn't make it big by a certain point in their career, and not that that's like a defined point per se, but if it's been a couple records and an artist is still playing 2,000 cap venues and there hasn't been any movement and they've been playing 2,000 cap venues for a couple of years, they're just not going to get bigger than that. I mean, the chances are very, very slim. I mean, I can't say I don't know. I can't say I know why, but I think it does tie into the idea that there's not really a certain single leader in the alternative scene right now.
It's frustrating, and something I bring up in I think I brought it up in Brad's podcast. Maybe I bring it up not quite. I've been having the same conversation with multiple people because I'm trying to like get a feel for some things that I want to do myself. But outside of alternative press, I was like, who is the next biggest competitor? And I've had some uniform responses, which I liked. Like there's a lot of individual opinions, but the alternative comes up a lot. Like Substream is not what alternative press does, but we are
Right.
Someone sent me a very nice text today, unasked, didn't know it was coming. That was about how we were doing a lot to diversify their own music taste, and they liked that, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But in terms of like the rock scene, who was doing it the best? Someone said the alternative, and I love the alternative, and they're going to be on the site soon, but their Patreon only gets $160 a month, and I'm like, okay, well.
Right, so they like might be doing a similar thing, but they're just not on the scale of something like alternative press.
And they can't find an audience willing to give them money to keep doing it. That's the part that interests me the most. Is like there's this podcast called The Last Pod on the Left that's on Patreon, and it's like a horror movie podcast, and those guys make $25,000 a month in Patreon donations.
Holy shit!
They do it.
I want to make $25,000 a month to podcast.
So like, let's say there's even 4 of them. You know, that's $300,000 a year. That's like $75,000 a piece. So let's say 60 after they do taxes for our business and stuff. But like that's like a real livable wage doing a podcast.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of horror movie podcasts, but those guys found a way to take people who liked their free content and convince them to each give $2 or $5 or $10 or something. And it's curious to me that nobody has been able to do it in alternative music. And some bands have been able to do it. Like The Maine is a great example of a group that has reached a point where they can do it themselves. But
but The Maine is also like and don't take this as like a criticism of The Maine, because I think they're fantastic, but they're probably not going to get quote unquote bigger than where they are now.
They're more like The Maine is more like Hanson. They don't have to get bigger. They can keep being exactly the size they are now forever because they'll continue to sell out forever. The Maine is basically Hanson for a younger demographic.
Oh my God.
I wish I was not podcasting to tweet right now, but I will get this out eventually. I'm going to like jot it down for myself right now.
Please
but it's interesting that there's not like none of them. None of the big, there are a few really popular podcasts, but none of them have like a huge backing. Like there's not a website nor an individual person that has like this voice that people are willing to financially support. And it's curious because I think it's in part because the artists don't seem to back any of them anymore. Like when I first started blogging, it was fairly simple. If you were the first person to cover an album or talk to an artist, that they would absolutely share your content.
Mm-hmm. And that doesn't seem to be as much a thing anymore, and it's so frustrating.
No, there is no expectation of shares unless you ask for it. In fact, like for Substream stuff, like for the covers, I've been on calls with somebody that's going to be on the cover of a magazine and still had to be like, so they will tweet about it, right? And they're being like, well, we'll have to get some tweets approved, and it's like, okay, well, like you have to ask for like the weirdest things sometimes now.
Yeah, well, and maybe that's just as, social media in and of itself is, changing how artists promote themselves or whatever, but it's so frustrating. When I was starting out blogging, I had no audience, zero, and the only way I got anybody to pay attention to what I was doing was getting bands to share my stuff, and that's why I made the effort, especially in the beginning, to write about so many smaller artists, because I knew they would value that and they would share it. And now it's, and now if there's no guarantee or expectation that someone's going to like share it, it's like, well, why would I spend my time writing about a small artist when I could, and they're not going to share it, if I can write about someone who has a much bigger reach, and it will at least drive more people to the link on my, that I post.
Absolutely. It's curious to me. And I see, and there's been a lot of sites that have died in recent years, and the same thing has happened in the film community. but the ones that have survived Bloody Disgusting / film, this and the podcasts that have taken off, they managed to wrangle a community, or they managed to convince. It's not a ton of people most of the time. Like that last pot on the left, the $25,000, they do it with like 1,600 contributors. Like it's not. There's this saying. There's this saying in business textbooks that if you can convince 1,000 people to financially support the thing that you're trying to do, then you will be able.
You'll be set.
Yeah, and I don't think you even need that many. I've done that. Like I've sat around at night and been like, okay, if I had a Patreon and everyone gave me $2, how many people giving me $2 would I need before I could like pay my rent? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, well, I definitely don't have that many people right now that would give me $2. And that kind of scares me as a creator. But then I'm also like, okay, well, could I get there doing what I do now? And I feel like what we're doing at Substream is indicative of what anyone that wants to succeed with what we're trying with this area of the industry right now is learning they have to do, which is, oh shit, I can't just be a pop punk kid for the rest of my life. Like if I want to make this business, I've got to know what the crap a Little Peep is before he dies. And I have to, you know what I mean? Like you have to be aware of these other things, and you have to be trying to integrate them, but also cater to this weird consumer base that listens to everything but doesn't care about anything enough to financially support it.
Yeah, it's definitely. Exactly. And it's so frustrating to me that people just don't seem to care about anything enough to financially support it. I mean, I don't know, like, I'm 26, so, you know, but my sister is 19. Like, my sister and her friends, do they have a favorite artist? Or are they just kind of like listening to whatever's on the, you know, Spotify New Music Friday playlist, you know? I don't know. The idea to me of not having anything you care enough to financially support, whether that's, you know, a media outlet or an artist, I mean, it's such a bummer. It's true. Like, it's completely true, but I don't know. I mean, just for me personally, like, I've taken so much personally from having a favorite band or favorite bands, favorite songs that I knew I could turn to. And to not have anything that I cared enough to call it my favorite, I don't know. That's really upsetting to me.
Well, New Music Friday does. You know me. I'm all about the Spotify numbers. So New Music Friday does have a 2.5 million subscribers. I know that their big hip hop one has some like stupid like 10 million subscribers or something.
Yeah.
Like that. But I do think about that. I think about that a little bit. But I go to these tours and I see some of these artists, some of these like streaming popular artists, like Brockhampton, for example. They have 25 merch designs, and they sell their shirts starting at like $35 a pop. And I saw kids line up, like if there were 400 kids at the show for a sold out show, then like 350 of them bought merch. Like kids are willing to give over money to support these artists but it's this weird threshold from my outsider's view as not being somebody that has successfully cracked the egg. It seems like you start creating this quality content and people start sharing it, and then at some point it's like you hit this weird tipping point where you release, like, I don't get when those people decide to release merch why they can sell $35 t-shirts. Like I watch it happen, and then I watch a rock band do a show that is arguably just as good, that have just as good of songs, that have,
and their shirts are like $15,
like $20,
and they can barely
$20. They played to 100 kids who had to pay less to get in the door, and they still can't move those shirts. But these kids will pay. I know that the Intersection here in Grand Rapids had Lil Uzi last year. He performed for 25 minutes. These kids definitely paid 30 or 35.
Wait, that was like a headline show?
Headlining show. He came out 30 minutes late, did 25 minutes, and tickets were like 30 or $35, and he sells merch, and kids buy tons of merch, and it's like that's enough for them. And they're willing to financially back that. Bands, they won't. And for some weird reason, we're finding that it's hard to find a publication. Like they want to feel immediately connected to their artist. And we see that the artists that can forge these like very personal connections with somebody tend to do successful with Patreons and things like that. Yeah. But you would think that there's a place for a journalist to do that as well, because as a consumer, for a young music fan, like, sure, if I want to be into Brockhampton, for example, and I
Yeah.
want to watch their show and I want to follow them all on Twitter and listen to all their albums. They released 3 last year. Like, that takes up a lot of my time. How many artists can I possibly do that for? Like, without
Yeah.
having somebody to, like, keep me up to date with all that information. You know what I'm
Right,
saying?
right. Yeah, and if you have a publication you're looking to, it's like this publication is telling you, oh, such and such artist did this artist did that. Oh, these people put out music videos this week. I think it's, I mean, in a way, I wonder if it's just the increased, like, reliance on social media, you know? I mean, I know that's almost, like, cliche, but, like, why I think at least like if I talk about, my sister who's 19 years old and like she likes music, she's not nearly as into it as you or I are, obviously, but she's not a person who's ever gonna follow Rolling Stone or Spin or Substream on Twitter. Well, she might follow Substream because I write for Substream, but if it wasn't for me, like she wouldn't she probably wouldn't pay attention to Substream. But she'll be like, well, why would I follow this magazine when I can just follow like the 3 artists I care about and see what they're up to? But from someone on the publication side, it's so frustrating.
It is, and it's funny because you and I have both been writing a lot of longer pieces in the last year. That's something we've kind of encouraged each other to do, and we have found some of our best success with it in terms of forging that connection that we're talking about, like that connection that you would think, like this is the thing that makes you feel shitty as a creative person, like you have to in today's day and age be like, oh, people are clicking with this, can I somehow translate their interest into money? Like it sucks, but because it's so hard to get people to actually pay you to be creative, that anytime something clicks, you're like, okay, how do we do more of this that will make people go for it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It sucks. I don't know. It just gets me so frustrated because we write these longer pieces, and there are people that reach out and they're like, oh, do more of that. And the publicists reach out and they're like, do more of this. I really like this.
Yeah.
But
Well,
still,
I mean,
the links in the chain are all there. The writer has an idea that they like. The people that read music writing like said idea. The people who facilitate the creation of music writing content like the idea. The one element that isn't there, which is somebody to pay for the damn thing to exist, is like, and that's the moment where everyone's like, whoa. I said I would read it. I said I would facilitate it. I said I would write it. I did not say I would pay for it. And and it's so messed up in my mind. Like I just don't know how to overcome it. And even when I see someone that like starts writing for, I don't even have a good big like Rolling Stone is a good example. Like I definitely, my friend Samantha did this Cardi B cover story, and I had a moment where I was like, okay, I know that they paid decent money, but I was like, okay, but there's only one of those. And it's ancient. Like, how do I get a 2018 thing to start that can tell those stories? Because the problem isn't a lack of people able to tell the kind of stories Rolling Stone puts.
There's so many talented writers.
The problem is people willing to believe that is so and support it. And I don't think that it has anything to do with fake news and Trump, because this isn't that. It's like, it's a general lack of, I guess, understanding for where that information comes from or how you receive information. I don't know. Sometimes I think it's like, I know that you're vegan. It's like it's like when people buy meat at the grocery store and they never consider like all the things that happened before that meat got shrink wrapped. Like
they just don't think about what
music
goes
content
into it.
Yeah, music content just appeared. Like it was not there and then it was there. Much like you did not have steak and then you have a steak.
Right. Well, and it's like even with, I mean, obviously there's something like an op-ed, and you and I have both written some, really personal op-eds that we've shared. Like that is something that doesn't necessarily require like an interview or something like that where you're like contacting with the artist and their PR in advance. But it takes, I mean, it's so much from like, okay, there's this thing that happened and there's a story I want to tell. And okay, how am I going to tell this story? Okay, I'm going to write 3 drafts of it before anyone sees it. okay, I'm going to get it in WordPress and make sure it looks good. And then you have something that's, an interview or an album review, and it's everything from doing your research, getting your background, and contacting the publicist and going back and forth and emails and phone calls, and there's so much that goes in that people really just don't think about, or because they don't see it.
I couldn't agree more. And how do we change that? This is something I was talking about with our mutual friend Kate this morning a little bit, because I want to put together this collection of writing. I know you want to do something similar with your work, and so I'm working on this collection of stuff I wrote last year. But it's all But I wrote it in this way. But I didn't write it with the intent of like I'm going to put it all together. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like a collective of things.
Yeah, so it's just but it's like messy. Yeah. In my brain, it's messy because it's just like I took whatever story. There's an element of what I do that we both of what we do that's like I took what was interesting to me. But in hindsight, if I was like, oh, I'm going to put this out as a collection, I would have been like, here are some stories I want to tell, or I'm going to approach it this way. And so this morning, I haven't done any shows this year. Starting Thursday, I think I'm doing like Thursday, Friday, or Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then next week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And so I'm about to like start into it, starting like shows and stuff. And so this morning I was like, now I need direction. Like what do I do this year? And how do I? And then the second thought was, will anyone give a damn? Like, how do I make people read it? Secondly,
well, that's the thing. That's the thing, and that's something that. So, I think the thought of like, how do I make someone give a damn? I think that's the thing that stops a lot of people from doing any kind of creative output, especially a creative output that's really personal. Like Logan and I had Brad LaPlante on Perspective last summer, right after Chester from Linkin Park passed away. And so we were talking about Chester and Linkin Park, and we all got into sharing personal stories about our own, mental health experiences and things we've been through. And that's something I'm very open and very comfortable talking about. But I remember like the second we finished recording, Logan and I texted each other and we were like, I don't know what's worse. If we put this out and people don't like it, or if we put this out and no one cares. Like the idea of putting your heart into something and no one saying anything. Oh God, it's terrifying. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. And I've found that like when I do put my heart into something, whether it's something, an album review, an interview, or something that's one of the more personal pieces, when I do really put my heart into something, people tend to care. Now it's, again, it's okay, how, if we talk about something like you were saying, like a collective work, it's, how do you approach that? I don't know.
Yeah, and this is like the heart of what I've really been struggling with is I want to the problem is not continuing to do what I do, like getting access at this point for either of us isn't really an issue. And I don't think developing as a writer is necessarily something I'm worried about, because I feel like that's a matter of simply challenging yourself and always looking for new opportunities. It's the longevity from the respect of scale. You know what I mean? Just like it would be one thing if the argument was like, oh, I'm making enough to cover my bills and not much more, and I would like to be able to at some point afford a house. But at this point, neither one of us are within spitting distance of I'm able to pay a bill, let alone my bills with writing. And it's funny because we've arguably never been getting more exposure for our work than we are right now.
Yeah.
And it's very wonderful. Like it's so nice to hear. But then we spend most of the day doing something else. And it's like, but if you would afford me the opportunity to only do the thing that you like me doing, I would do it so much better for you.
Right. And look, I have a full-time job in the music industry. I work in a music video promo company. Like, my job is cool. I love my job. But oh my God, if I could write full time, oh God, that would I, you know, God, I would love that, of course.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what comes of this year. I want to know some Molly facts because
Yeah,
we've been talking about my stuff and stuff that we've been doing together, but we wanted to do this podcast for a while now.
yeah,
You and I went to Texas a
yes.
couple months ago in November, and we had an adventure that we were like, we should definitely do a podcast, and then we never did a podcast. So, but we
Well,
had a good day. We had a good day together at that. It was one of my favorite days.
Oh, it was awesome.
It was, yeah, I don't know. I always tell people that networking is so important in music, and they're like, well, how do I network? And there's so much of it that people are like, oh my
Yeah.
God, you send emails
Yeah.
and do that. But like, the real memories are those moments like the day you and I had in Texas.
Yeah. Yeah, where we, decide, oh shit, we're not going to make it to Houston in time. Why don't we get tattoos?
Yeah.
And I got a tattoo of an album that hadn't been released yet.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It was a good time in Texas. But we
It was a very
also,
good time.
it was a weird time because you and I had known each other for a long time. We were friends, but then we had an opportunity, thanks to the industry, to like spend time together and do something unrelated to music and talk about real life things. And from a professional standpoint, I always feel like that's when you actually make a connection in this business. Is like when you have a story that's like, remember that time in the whatever comes out of your mouth doesn't end with at that concert.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. It's making connections with people, and that's something that you obviously know this about me, but I'm so huge on making real, true connections with people, because that's what's going to last,
Absolutely. And that's what I feel fuels the best stories we tell. Like when you and I are trying to write some of these things we're doing, it's always like, how do I create a narrative for this thing? And like that day, you and I thought we had one, which was we were going to drive 4 hours to Houston, see a basketball game, your first basketball game. And then we were going to drive back, and we were going to have all this time and like all this road trip story, and we'd see Texas. And then like, this was for everyone else, this was the same day of that church shooting in Texas. So the whole, like, it was doomed from the moment we woke up. And like, then we couldn't make it due to traffic, and we were already halfway there. So we turned around and we're driving through the countryside, and we went to the house where they filmed the Munsters. Like, it became this expedition. And much like,
what like my favorite part of that day was? Like, no lie. Like, right after we saw the Munsters house, I think we just like drove like a few minutes down the road so you could like pull over somewhere, and we just stepped out of the car, and we were in the straight up middle of absolute nowhere. Like, there was nothing, like a field, and we were just like talking about real life shit. Like, that's the shit that like you're gonna remember,
Absolutely. And that's what I'm always looking for when we're writing these like music, when we're doing our music writing, is you're doing an interview with somebody, or especially like when you're in person. I know you just went to, we're just going to say it because it's not the cover story, so whatever. Like, you interviewed Dermot Kennedy for the new issue of the magazine. And you got to like go to this cool secret show in New York and see him do his thing for like industry people. But like, there, like, you told me this after the fact. Like, there were like a bunch of people there who could write the exact same story, and your challenge was to find that moment you pulled over to the side of the road and turn it into like a narrative about this dude's music.
Yeah, and that's what I've always said is the most valuable thing you have as a writer is your own voice. How many people are going to write about the same things? Well, why would anyone read Molly Huddleston's writing? Well, hopefully, because they like the bands I'm writing about, but other people write about the artists I write about. Ultimately, people are going to read my writing because they like the way I write and the voice I have.
Absolutely. So let's talk about that piece, because this will come out probably tomorrow. I don't know that I feel like recording an intro tonight. We'll see.
Okay.
But by the time people have heard this, just everyone keep this secret. Molly interviewed Dermot Kennedy for an interview in this issue of Substream. She did a couple of interviews, but this is one of them.
Yeah.
So you do this industry thing with Dermot Kennedy, and for those that don't know, he's like this Irish, right? He's Irish.
Irish, yeah.
Yeah, Irish singer-songwriter. He's great. So you go to this thing, industry people there, and you have to write a story about it. Give us the inside baseball. So how do you did an interview too. So you have an interview and you have what your eyeball saw. Tell me about how you wrote the story. Where did it start? How did you end it? Tell me everything.
So the story I think I mostly went more based around the interview. And it was, it's interesting with Dermot Kennedy because he was someone that, you and I had talked about just being a fan of. And I'm like trying to think back to writing it because it's like almost 2 months ago. I just tried to tell what I felt made him different from anyone else. I sat down and I did my research, but the story I went with, I mean, yes, of course, I'm going to say, okay, he's worked with this cool director, this director Nabil, who has done like Bon Iver and Kendrick Lamar videos. So that was the thing I mentioned. But where I think I started off was this idea that, that Dermot brought up in the interview that, if you're a musician and you're on stage in front of a couple hundred people or 1,000 people that have paid to be there, every single person in the room is paying attention because they paid to be there. Of course they're going to pay attention. But if you're busking on the street, which is where he got his start, was busking on the street for years in Dublin, you have to make people pay attention to you. And it's just this weird dichotomy and this weird adjustment. And that's kind of where I started with that. And where I think I ended with it was the idea that there are so many things, obviously there are so many things that are going to happen in an artist's career, and there are so many things it takes to make a good song. The music itself, he talked about Sugar Ross and how they make this like really powerful music that regardless of if people can understand the lyrics, they just connect with. But he ultimately brought it back to something that I have always been driven by is the lyrics themselves and how it's being able to connect with people through the lyrics and the stories that you tell.
That's awesome. I mean, you write good stories, but I thought it would be interesting to have someone on to kind of talk about this a little bit because as I'm working on this new long read with Dale's, it was a weird challenge because he answered several times in our 30-minute interview. He had answers that were like 7 minutes long, and he would apologize by being like, sorry, I have done this so long that sometimes I answer like, I try to answer like this question and then the next two questions that you're going to ask me. And so, but now that I'm trying to do the written version of this interview, like I don't want to do it in the order that he answered, because the way he answered it isn't good, because he talks about like 6 things, and then I have to ask him questions about those things, and so then I have to like pull a quote from later and then go back up to that first big chunk of text and like move it around. And I was just thinking a lot about the structure, because sometimes I feel like writing a story, 1 page in the magazine is a challenge, but when you start doing with like a couple of pages, I feel like it often feels like Jenga, where you start with like the interview I did and the whole experience of like doing the story, usually seeing the show, and then you just push them together and you just push out blocks, and you hope whatever's still standing will stand. You're just like, there's an ending and a beginning, and then a bunch of quotes in the middle and some connective tissue.
Hopefully I can make it make sense.
I think there's a story. I don't know. It's always a challenge. Like every now and then, I feel like I knock it out of the park. Like sometimes I feel like you're doing an interview, or you're in the experience of what will become a story, and you have a moment that happens, and you're like, that's the end of the story. It's not the end of the night. It's just like when I saw Modson and I saw this girl crying, I was like, okay, this girl crying will be the end of the story. It'll be the button at the end of my story. And then something else happened, and like he's the kind of person where the story can begin when you meet him because he has like an immediately shareable kind of personality.
Yeah. Well, I remember. So I'm looking on my wall. I have a collage. My friend Jackie gave me. She made a collage of like some of like my. Well, she asked me. She's like, "What are your favorite photos you've taken?" So I sent her a bunch. And in this collage on my wall is a photo I took of Taylor Swift, 2.5 years ago, and on the 1989 tour. And I remember like being at that show and first of all, I had never been to a stadium show. Like, I'd been to arenas, but a stadium show where it is like 60,000 people, like that is twice as many people as the town that I grew up in. This is MetLife Stadium is literally where the New York Giants play. So that experience of just being in such a large space, I mean, for a concert, for me personally, was bizarre, but really powerful. And she said, like, probably 2/3 the way through the show, Taylor Swift said something about how these shows feel so intimate. Like, she closes her eyes and they feel so intimate, and she just feels really connected or whatever. And immediately I knew that was going to be the opening to my review.
Those moments are so good when the story falls into spot. And I don't know, I kind of like this Dales thing. I recorded it like on the 17th of December, so I've had almost a month away from it, and it's kind of nice to look at it with fresh eyes, because as much as I hate the challenge, I guess the fun of it is being like, how do I turn this? The fun of it is like, it's like clay, and you're kind of like trying to like figure out what it can be.
Yeah.
It's harder with phone interviews because you have to build so much connective tissue out of nothing. You have to be like,
definitely.
This is the static on the other end of the line, and like filling it with other stories. When you're actually there, at least you have the element of like, you can talk to people, you can watch moments happen. My new thing is I try to ask if I can, if the person is doing a meet and greet, if I can hang out for the meet and greet and then talk to somebody.
That's good. That's good.
Because I'm fascinated by people that pay like $200 to meet their favorite artist, and I want to. Like,
I've never paid for a meet and greet, but a friend of mine in November 2016, Good Charlotte was doing their first headliner, and still their only like full U.S. headliner, the Youth Authority tour. And a friend of mine was like, "Hey, I got 2 tickets and meet and greet and side stage passes for the show. Like, do you want to come with me?" And so she paid the money, and I bought her a shirt or something, I think. But I mean, my friend, so I didn't pay for it, but my friend did. And I will say, to meet Good Charlotte was so cool, because they've been my favorite band since I was 11 years old. And, to have that experience where I could actually go up to them and say, "Hey, I have this tattoo of your lyrics," and kind of nerd out for a second, and then to watch the show from side stage. I mean, look, there's not a lot of artists that I would pay, $200 to meet. But I do understand what it's like to, like, why people do,
No, I do. I've been looking at it more and more. This is my thing. I would do it.
Yeah.
For
Need to Breathe?
I don't even know. No, because they did it on their most recent tour, and they even had an offer. Their meet and greet, I don't remember. Let's say it was $100 or $150, but it included that you got to play ping pong with the guys. That was like one of the things you got to do, which I thought was kind of like a cool thing, because that's like that requires them to give you undivided attention.
Yeah.
Which I was into, but I think I would pay it if I could meet an artist of a certain age or a certain impact on my life. Like, I don't know if there's anyone that is under the age of, let's say, 40, 45 that is like so meaningful to my life that I would pay anything to like meet them, let alone like for what, like a handshake and a photo.
Right.
I do know that. So like, I love comedy. So like Ron White is a comedian that I still want to see on my bucket list. And he he does a 3-tiered VIP program, and like the top one, and it's in comedy they really screw you because they do this in some artists do this in music too, but the VIP also corresponds with seating, so like the first 15 rows are reserved
I
for
hate
people.
that. I hate that.
So like if you want to sit in like row 10, it's still like $150 VIP package versus like a $35 ticket.
No, I hate that.
But Ron White, he does one that's $150 and one that's $250. And the $250 one, you get a DVD, an autographed tour laminate, you get a seat in the first 5 rows, and you get like a photo op with Ron. He doesn't sign anything in person because that would take too long. But like in my head, I remember one time at South by Southwest, we got into this Jim Beam party to launch Kid Rock's whiskey, and like the actual the actual grandson of Jim Beam was there, and we all did shots with him, and like he came back to like this media toast, and it was like 9 people there, and it was like in overalls, and it was great, and he did shots with all of us, and then Kid Rock showed up, and they were like, well, you can meet Kid Rock if you want, and we were like, oh my god, we're gonna get 5 minutes with Kid Rock and it'll be amazing. And it wasn't. Like we were basically put into the line for what was a VIP meet and greet with Kid Rock, and it amounted to literally walking in front of the photo scrim, and he was already standing there, and the bright lights are on you. There's like 3 or 4 fake prop lights, and he's like, hey, I'm Kid, and you're like, hi, I'm James, and Ben's like, hey, I'm Ben, and he's like, nice to meet you guys, click, have a good night, and like that's the whole thing. And in my head, $250 to meet Ron White. I don't need the DVD. I don't need the autographed tour laminate. Right. The photo would be cool if it's like a nice photo. Do I get a high quality copy of it? How do I find it? Do you just put it on Facebook? Like, where do I get this photo from? I just don't know if it's worth it. Like, I would want, if I could have a cup of coffee with my favorite artist, I would pay $150. I don't have to be the only one. Let me be one of 5 people. Like, let me sit at a table with you and like 5 fans.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if I could ever get on that boat, but I struggle with it because I'm somebody that wants to have my own Patreon at some point. So I want people to give me money for things that are also free.
Right.
So go back and forth. We'll see. I'll probably sell out. I'll spend it eventually. There'll be somebody that comes along. Like if Pusha T did a meet and greet pass.
Oh my god.
I'd be on that. Like I'd be into that.
Okay.
But I also feel like I could just interview Pusha T. And it would be more meaningful, even if it was just over the phone. That 15 minutes of forced conversation would still be more authentic than like, hey, let's take a picture in front of this prearranged photo op together.
Right, definitely.
Like, how could I ever be like, could you imagine paying $100 to meet Need to Breathe and then be there and be like, hey, I interviewed you once. And they're like, and now you're paying to do the same thing? Like, I don't. Right. It's strange. But on the same token, I saw this tweet the other day where someone was like, sexed, hey, I saw your band was in town and I went ahead and bought my own ticket so you don't have to put me on the list.
Right.
Fair.
I saw that. I love that.
Fair. Dang, we almost filled a whole hour together, Molly. Let me ask you this.
I know.
This has been a theme of January 2018 episodes. For starters, I said last week that you weren't getting paid for this episode. I didn't mean that. We can pay you if you want, but we help each other out in like getting real jobs. So like, yeah, that's the gift that keeps on giving. Is I taught you how to fish, so I don't have to give you a fish. Yeah. 2 things. 1, who do you think should be a guest on an upcoming episode that you would like to hear? And 2, what is coming from Molly in the future? You have this podcast, you're contributing. We talked about Substream most of this time. And I want to know what else is going on in Molly's world. What's coming up? What do we have to look forward to in 2018? Sorry for the phone ring. My mom is calling for everyone at home.
Hi, James's mom. Okay. So who do I want to see as a guest on this show? I would love to see people, I mean, more industry professionals. I mean, I don't know, have you had any like managers, or have you ever had like a booking agent or a promoter on the show?
I think we've had a couple, but it's been a long time. I've had a lot of people ask for Johnny Minardi this week,
Yeah.
so he would be somebody that would fit that. And people want Jamie Coletta, but I don't know that Jamie's gonna want to do a podcast
Yeah.
right now. But if you're listening, Jamie, you're always welcome on the show. It's just I understand that now might not be the best time. But I have okay, so like some more industry talk. I want to get into that. I do. I think that that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Go. Nope. Okay. Now let's talk Molly 2018, Molly 2K18. What should people be on the lookout for?
Definitely. I mean, a lot of stuff, like I said, coming up at Substream, both in the current issue and the next issue coming up. I am working with Arbella, the print editor, on a piece I'm very, very excited about for the March issue. And I definitely will have some stuff online. I also have a podcast called Perspective. Logan and I are recording this weekend. We kind of got off at the end of the fall. We kind of got off in terms of how regularly we recorded. But you know, life happens. But we're hoping to just do more episodes this year. I run a blog called Circles and Sound Waves. So I'll be doing some stuff with that as well. And yeah, I mean, my full-time job, because I don't think I actually said like the name of the company I work for. I work at a company called Hip Video Promo. I'm their marketing and communications coordinator. So, you know, be doing a lot of that, getting a lot of music videos out into the public.
That's great. Let me ask you this. This will be a fun last question for the show. Even though I think
Yeah.
I think we're like right now hitting an hour, so that's good.
Okay.
That's good. These I gotta get shorter podcasts. If we make it to an hour
I
and
mean,
a
I
half,
have time. I'm down to keep chatting.
No, if we make it to an hour and a half, that'll be 4 hours of show this week, and I'm not getting into 4 hours of podcasting a week. I refuse. People ask me if I can do their podcast, and I'm like, no. I spent a fifth of a day working on podcasts this week, and I'm done.
Yeah, I think when we had you on Perspective, it was like an hour and 37 minutes.
Ben drags the extra hour out of me on not quite this week. I definitely try to end it at an hour and a half.
So are you going with the full 2.5 hours?
I cut 8.5 minutes off the beginning of the episode because it started a little aggressively.
Oh God. Okay.
So
Wow.
I cut off a few, and so it fades in when we're talking about the new Justin Timberlake song.
Okay. All right.
So there's a new Not Quite out there, but I wanted to ask you. You've talked to me about this before, but let's just talk about it on the show.
Yeah.
In what world do you stop doing circles and sound waves? Is that a world that exists?
It's definitely a world that could exist and very well could exist. You know, I have a lot of friends that come from, you know, the music blogging world, and run websites, you know, of the size of what I do. And I've wrestled with it a lot, probably over the past year, of like, at what point does it come to an end? And I know, like, personally, I mean, I know a lot of people kind of have this idea that if you have a thing that you run, that you're in charge of, and I mean, financially, look, like my sites run through Tumblr, so I pay GoDaddy like not that much money every year, so it's not like running the website in itself is some big.
Okay, well, I've just been thinking, you know, as things like Substream develop, you've been more involved there. Like, I'm curious, or I think that maybe for people that think that maybe this is like a lead up to some like crazy reveal for Molly, it's not.
No,
I'm largely just curious because I always wonder, like, is it that you don't have a bigger role at Substream? I guess why are you stretching yourself so thin with so many projects when it seems like there are things where you're excelling
Right.
and you could kind of consolidate your passions?
I think what I always said was I will, because I've always known I wanted to write, and I wanted to keep writing and doing photography, and I wasn't going to stop doing circles and sound waves until I felt like I had somewhere that I was, you know, another outlet I was contributing to, that I felt I had a
significant role in. And I don't think I necessarily ever decided like what exactly that meant, whether that's like, okay, I have some gig that's paying me a certain amount of like money every month to have like a really, really big role, or I have a full-time job doing music writing, or it's just I have something else I'm trying to devote my attention to. But it's you know, I definitely in some aspects feel like I'm stretching myself thin, and it's hard because in some ways, you know, I really do want to devote myself to certain things, you know, to devote more to Substream and everything. But it's also, you know, realistically, it's like, okay, like how do you, I don't know, like how do you end it? Like how big of a deal do you make out of ending a blog? You know, I don't know. But it's something I could foresee happening relatively soon.
Well, maybe
Yeah.
maybe we'll figure something out that makes you feel fulfilled and does that. Not that you have to. I mean, I encourage you to do whatever works for you. But I see you stretching yourself then, so you know.
Yeah.
I do the same thing though. Like this is the pot calling the kettle black. So.
Yeah, I know you do so many things as well.
I do some stuff. Okay, Molly. Well, I've taken up an hour of your day.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. And you've given us so much information. Where can everyone find you online other than substreammagazine.com?
My Twitter and my Instagram are both mhudelson at MHUDELSON. My website, which has not been updated in a very long time, but it is also mhudelson.com. And you can find me on Facebook. Just look for Molly Louise Hudelson.
Wonderful. Thank you for being on the show this week, Molly.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited for this to be up and to share it with the world, and can't wait to listen to the new Not Quite later.
I never remember what episode. I think you're episode number 118. So congratulations.
Okay.
118. 118 episodes in the book. We'll be back next week with another episode featuring, I think, Hendo from The Alternative, but we haven't locked in a interview time yet, so that may change. Also, we've mentioned Not Quite on the show quite a bit, no pun intended there. And it is no longer being run in the Inside Music feed. Actually, during this conversation, I finished uploading the new episode, which is available on iTunes.
Definitely the pot calling the kettle black that you're working on one podcast while recording.
I just hit upload. Not Quite is officially on iTunes. It's not under music. It is under the self-help section on iTunes podcasts.
Oh, wow.
So get on there and subscribe and review the show like you have this show so that maybe we can get some mentions.
Yeah, can I just give a shout out and really tell people to please listen to Not Quite, because I think it is very wonderful and important with what you're doing there. Please, if you listen to Inside...
the 2.5-hour episode that just came out.
I'll listen to it while I'm making pasta. No, everyone should listen to it. Please, it is worth spending your time with.
Well,
I mean, I haven't listened to this one yet, but this show in general.
I appreciate it, even though you haven't heard the new episode. No one has. I mean, someone might have by now, but no one's done listening to it yet, so that's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you again for being on the show. I think we can finish recording now, but for those that forgot already, the song at the beginning was Dead-Eye by Lil Fag. Go check that out. The new issue of Substream will be announced this Friday. Follow Holix on Twitter. It's at HAULIX. I'm trying to get better at doing important reminders at the end of the show so it doesn't just end. So that's it. That's the show. The episode is brought to you by Holix and by Bai, BAI Drinks.
Oh my God.
Live that flavor life, okay? Say bye, Molly.
Bye.
You're supposed to say bye, Molly. Come on.
Bye.
Okay. Thanks for listening.